So you have obstructive sleep apnea. You've ruled out all conservative treatment options that you're aware of, and you're still coming up short and have decided to go down the route of double jaw surgery. You have gone through the process to pare it down to 3 to 5 top surgeons that you would consider working with, that you're now going to consult with. And now you're wondering, what do I ask these surgeons in order to help me determine which surgeon to hire for this procedure? I've constructed a list of 9 questions, and keep in mind these are really basic questions that are a good starting point. And I guarantee there's at least one question that is not on this list that you're not going to realize you should have been asking until you're about 3 to 4 consultations in, which is another good reason to save your top surgeons as kind of the last surgeons you consult with in this process, because you'll be much better at consulting with these surgeons at that point in time. The answers to these questions are not final answers. Keep in mind that the surgeons are going to give you estimates, and the final plan doesn't come until your surgical planning meeting, which is much closer to your actual jaw surgery date. So take it as an estimate, but at least this gives you a good idea of how these surgeons think and whether they are much more prone to taking risk or whether they're much more conservative, which helps you kind of match your own philosophy to the right surgeon based on their philosophy. The questions that I recommend asking would be, how far forward would you move my maxilla? How far forward would you move my mandible? That would be the upper and lower jaw. How much counterclockwise rotation would you do in my case? So remember, we talked about on a previous video, they cut across here, which is the Fort 1 osteotomy, and then you have your BSSO cuts down here. You then have these freely moving portions of the maxilla and mandible. The upswing, you'll also hear it called, is the counterclockwise rotation, where they rotate the front part of those jaws upward. This could be done for a variety of reasons. The degree at which they will rotate you depends on the starting facial structure, more specifically your occlusal plane angle, but I won't get more into that today, but it would be good to know how much they would plan to rotate you in your case. You also want to ask if they would be doing a segmental maxillary osteotomy. So remember, the maxilla is going to come forward here because you did this cut. And now a segmental would be where they cut the maxilla, and I won't go into specifics of this, but there's quite a variety in regards to how a surgeon could do this and for what reasons they would do it. Would they do more than one cut on the maxilla? So not just sliding you forward, but more so cutting in several pieces in order to either widen or potentially correct a maxillary cant. Again, I won't go more in depth with that, but it would be good to know their thought process in that regard. The next 3 questions help you understand, oh wow, is this surgeon willing to do a lot of different procedures in my case versus stick to the basics? So you want to ask, would you do a genioplasty? Would you do a genioglossus advancement? Would you do any additional procedures either in my nasal cavity or elsewhere? An example of this would be, or several examples would be, terminate reduction, septoplasty. There is one very well-known surgeon who does cheekbone implants frequently. So that might be one of your questions. Or you might get a curveball that I'm not mentioning here. You then want to ask, how many times a year do you do this surgery? And how many years have you been doing this? We talked about this before. One of your biggest jobs in this process is to protect yourself. And you want to go with the surgeon who has a lot of experience in this specific procedure. If your surgeon has 10 years of wisdom teeth extraction, great, maybe go with them for wisdom teeth extraction. That doesn't mean that they're going to be skilled at double jaw surgery. So make sure this person has experience. And we've already gone through some of that process in regards to trying to vet them before they get on your list. But I would still be interested in asking them in person how much experience they have in this specific procedure. And then one of my favorite questions, and the last question here, is, do you have any concerns in my case? Now, the answer of that question, or to that question, could vary quite a bit. It could be an aesthetic concern. For example, oh, your nose is already wide, or your nose is very small, and I don't think it will be able to adapt the way we would like it to aesthetically, and it might be upturned or it might widen even more. It could be your tooth roots are shorter than I would like them to be, and I'm concerned that you may lose teeth with this process. Or it could be an expectation issue where your surgeon thinks your expectations may be a little bit too high for the skill set needed to achieve those goals. The reason I love this question is because it gives your surgeon an opportunity to be very honest with you. And then it also puts you and the surgeon on the same team in regards to, okay, if this is a concern, what are our options for mitigating the risk associated with this concern? It just makes for a very honest conversation that feels good in regards to teamwork. And then there might be a scenario where your surgeon doesn't have any concerns, and that's actually an interesting situation. I feel like most surgeons have at least one or two things in their mind in regards to something they know they kind of have to be extremely careful with in your case. And it's nice to know that as a patient, what those specific details are. I think this is a great list of basic questions to start with if you don't have any idea of what to ask going into your first consultation. But remember that this list will grow as you get better at consulting. And I do highly suggest writing these out on a piece of paper or typing them out and bringing it with you to the consultation, because doing consultations is actually hard as a patient. There's emotional stress involved in it, and it's very difficult to think on the fly when it's your own case. So going into these consultations, at least if you have a piece of paper to reference, if you kind of lose your train of thought or you get a little flustered, go back to the piece of paper, make sure you leave that consultation with all of your questions answered. And if you get answers to more questions you hadn't even thought of, that's great. But at least you have answers to your basics, so then you can kind of compare and contrast between surgeons. You might even want to bring a pencil to write things down if you feel like you have a hard time remembering after appointments like this. I'm sure your surgeon wouldn't mind for you to take notes in the process. So good luck with your consultations. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments below or find me at summerspt.com.